Hello, my fellow Americans. 'Tis I, the Rumpled One. Friday, August 24th, 2012. I went to 2 public meetings yesterday. I noticed on the calendar that a couple of the taxing districts were having their monthly meetings. So I thought, hey, I can, one trip to town, 2 meetings. The funny thing is, I hadn't been to a public meeting in a while. Kind of forgot a few things. But I understand why most people don't go to public meetings. They are painful to sit through. You have to endure stupidity and ignorance. You have to endure egos. Some people just like to hear themselves talk. The sound of their own voice must be like those wind chimes, music to their ears. And some of the people just sit there like bumps on a log, just waiting for it to be over. First meeting I went to was one of the, I'm not going to name the districts, that's not going to really serve any point at this time, but they were one of my nemesis. And one of the members used to be on a different taxing district board. These people, they just kind of go from board to board. Because most people, once again, they just don't want to have anything to do with this nonsense. But they suffer the consequences of their inaction and their decision and choices. So I'm sitting there watching, and I noticed how they start the meeting off and they ask for public input. And they were real courteous. Now, back when I used to go there on a regular recurring basis, they weren't so courteous. In fact, they were downright hostile. At least towards me. If you were part of the clique, then they were pretty decent. But after they had the input, they had a speaker from a state government agency come in to give a presentation. Yeah, typical government employee who got up with his little PowerPoint presentation and talked and talked and talked, but a point was never really made. But I was paying attention. I didn't videotape it. You would have been bored. But he said that the mission or goal of his little department or function was to create jobs and retain jobs. He must have spoke for at least 15-20 minutes. It seemed like hours. And I was listening intently. I usually almost always sit in the front row, so I don't miss a thing. I'm paying attention. I'm observing. Well, he gave his presentation, and I was just waiting. I was hoping at the end he would ask for questions. He never did. So I didn't get to ask my one question. And that one question was, because he never talked about it, was how many jobs did your agency create last year and how many did you retain? Since this is your main goal. If this is your main goal, don't you think you would talk about it during your presentation? He talked about all this other stuff. So that was one thing I found enlightening. and confirming about just how government is just, for the most part, a waste. They're buffoons. Second thing was, in his PowerPoint, he said how all these different agencies, I think there was 4 or 5 of them, were working together. And you come into town, you work with the mayors and the schools and higher education. It all sounds good, but what gets accomplished? So then he put up a map. Well, here's this one agency, and they had the state, and it was color-coded, the different regions. So I looked at it. Then he brought up another agent. It was color-coded. But the regions were all different. And then he put up a third. And once again, the regions are all different. And he brought up a fourth. So you got all these government agencies, these state agencies, but they each one divide up the state in different regions. Am I the only one that thinks that's lunacy? That's idiotic? It's like, okay, if you're going to draw lines, here's the lines. All state agencies should be serving the same area. Wouldn't that make sense? So if you've got the Northwest, here's your boundaries. If you got the Northeast, if you've got Central, why would you have different boundaries for different agencies? I mean, why would one group have one county in it, but the other group, no, for that same area, nope, that county belongs over here now. Once again, government, it's just nuts. It's like the right hand doesn't even know that the left hand exists. And the left hand doesn't know that the right hand's doing something. But we know what those hands are doing. They're in our pockets, hit National Bank, extracting dollars. Well, that was the first meeting. Basically, a waste of time, but very informative from the standpoint of just seeing how poorly government functions. But the funny thing was, after he talked, how these, you know, let's call them these bobbleheads on the board, commission, oh, what a great presentation. It's like, are you freaking kidding me? So then I went to another taxing district meeting, or tax district meeting. I call them the powers that tax, the PTT. Well, they had it once again open for public input. And this one lady got up, and she's part, I guess, something with health care, where out here in the country, you know, we don't have those big hospitals. We got a hospital here, but it's, you know, I guess they have different levels. So we've got this small hospital, and then down south in the next county, you know, they've got a hospital, but in between these two hospitals, there's probably 50 miles or more out here in the country. Some people, they don't have access, you know, to a hospital. They have to drive 50 miles or more. So they're coming in with like some type of clinic to, you know, fill in the gap. Well, her area overlaps 2 counties. And somehow I guess she's going to get some federal funding. I don't know if this has anything to do with Obamacare or not. She didn't say, so I'm not going to assume. Anyway, she does her presentation. You know, it makes sense to me. And all she was asking for was for this board to write a letter of recommendation or a letter of support for what she's doing, so she can do her paperwork and turn it into the feds. Because, you know, that's what government loves. It's just, oh, letters of recommendation, blah, 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 and that's how they appropriate your money. Which reminds me of something about the first meeting, but I'll have to get back to that. So, now these bobbleheads on this particular board were trying to decide whether or not it's a good idea to give this lady this letter of recommendation. And so this one guy who definitely loves the sound of his own voice said, well, let's make this contingent upon what the other county decides. If they are for it, then, you know, we'll do it, so long as they're not against it. You know, we don't want to step on their toes. So in other words, they can't make up the decision on their own. They're afraid of a turf war over health care. I mean, you're a taxing district. Don't you want people? So instead of being focused on what would be good for the people in, you know, in their taxing district that would be served by this, they're more worried about offending some bobbleheads in another county, another power to tax. We don't want to offend them. You know, we don't want to step on their toes. Are you freaking kidding me? It got interesting though, because then they did a little election of the officers of the board, and basically nothing changed. The chairman's still the chairman, but then that guy, Mister, who loves the sound of his own voice, was saying that, you know, they're looking for hiring a higher up, and he wanted to say that the selection committee should only be comprised of the elected board themselves and some staff people that the chairman of the board gets to choose. Well, the chairman, I guess, had wanted to appoint some guy that wasn't staff, somebody from the general public, and so he changed the guy's motion to say that this would be for future, and the guys, no. Well, it was going back and forth, and they were shouting. He goes, we need to take a recess. I need to talk to you. I thought they were going to come to blows, but the chairman's like, well, can't you say this in front of the rest of us and in front of the public? So he goes, okay. And he just said, you know what, if you try this, then maybe, you know, we're going to have to vote you out as chairman. So I was like, wow, this is cool. But the chairman backed down, and, you know, business as usual. So the lady is waiting to see if she can get this letter of recommendation. I think she has like a 3 or 4 week deadline. So we'll see what these bobbleheads come up with. Now, back to the first group of bobbleheads. This group of bobbleheads, their taxing district seems to get involved in so many different things. They're fingers and pies. They have nothing to do with what they're really supposed to be doing. And so there's a new business opening in town. Be built, you know, groundbreaking ceremony. Well, come to find out, this taxing district secured federal funds and is now lending $250,000 to this business. It's like this taxing district is not in the banking business. But somehow these guys always get their hands on a bunch of money or things of value. I just don't know what's going on. So I just wanted to show up so they can see my smiling face, so they know I'm watching. Maybe I'll even go in the office and start requesting public records again, because that always makes them nervous. Yeah, I might just do that the next time I happen to be in town during the day and their office is open. Let them know I'm back in town. Say the old sheriff's back in town. Anyway, in fact, that's what some guys used to, they nicknamed me Sheriff, because they knew I'd go after these taxing districts that are taking money out of my pocket. So the main point of this is I really do understand why most people don't want to get involved. They don't want to run for office. They don't want to volunteer to sit on these boards and committees, because they don't want to just sit there and waste their time and listen to these bobbleheads. But people, My fellow Americans, if you don't take care of where you live, who's going to take care of it for you? If you don't watch what your local public elected officials are doing, then you're kind of missing it. You're shirking your responsibility. You're slacking on your community. You need to be involved, because see, these local guys, next thing you know, they're running for a state office. Next thing you know, they're running for a federal office. And by you not keeping your eye on them and keeping them on the straight and narrow, you go, well, let somebody else go to those meetings. Well, you see what happened. You get what you got. So, I know you're not crazy. And since you're not crazy, you're going to have to make a change. Because if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you got. So it's up to you, my fellow Americans. I'm going to do what I need to do to take care of my area, my county. Keep an eye on these guys. Let them know I'm watching. Let them know I'm going to call them out when I see them crossing the line or even getting close to it. Will you do the same for your county? Otherwise, the game could be over. The party could be over. This current federal administration under Obama So, my fellow Americans, it's time to wake up and smell the tyranny.